October 14, 1943, 25,000 feet above the industrial city of Schweinfurt, Germany, Lieutenant Colonel William Temple grips the controls of his B-17 Flying Fortress as his oxygen mask ices over. Outside, the temperature has plummeted to 45 degrees Celsius. Inside the unpressurized bomber, every breath freezes instantly, clogging the narrow oxygen lines that keep the crew alive. A creeping fog of hypoxia begins to cloud Temple's mind, that deceptive sense of euphoria that has already claimed hundreds of Allied airmen. In the waist gunner's position, Sergeant Frank Morrison squeezes his oxygen tube, trying to crush the ice crystals cutting off his air. His vision narrows to a tunnel. His fingers lose sensation. At this altitude, unconsciousness takes minutes, death follows in 10. By October 1943, more than 300 high-altitude missions have ended in catastrophe from oxygen failure. Pilots have blacked out at the controls. Navigators have slumped over their maps. Gunners have frozen in place. Nearly half of all non-combat B-17 losses stem from crew incapacitation due to oxygen starvation. The 8th Air Force is bleeding men faster than America can train them. Each bomber carries 10 specialized crew members, each taking 8 months to replace. The math is merciless. The U.S. is running out of trained airmen. What Temple cannot know, as he struggles to stay conscious over enemy territory, is that 8,000 miles away in Rochester, Minnesota, an Armenian-American dentist with no military background is on the verge of solving the problem, killing his countrymen. Dr. Arthur Bulbulian has never flown a mission. He has no military rank. His expertise lies in facial prosthetics, crafting artificial noses and ears for disfigured patients. But in the basement of the Mayo Clinic, he's been consumed by a challenge the experts have already written off as impossible, creating an oxygen mask that will not freeze at altitude. The military engineers say it can't be done. The physics defy the materials. The problem began in 1940, when the U.S. Army Air Corps embraced a bold new doctrine, high-altitude daylight precision bombing. The plan seemed brilliant. Fly above enemy fighters, strike with surgical accuracy, and return home safe. The reality was biological disaster. At 25,000 feet, air pressure falls to 1/3 of sea level. Without supplemental oxygen, a man has perhaps 4 minutes before hypoxia shuts down his mind. Captain James Morrison of the 95th Bomb Group described it bluntly. "You'd be flying formation at 25,000 feet, everything fine. Then you'd exhale. That warm, moist breath would hit the 40 air inside the mask, ice up instantly, and block the valve. You had 30 seconds to clear it or you were done. Every mask in the Allied arsenal froze solid under combat conditions. The A-8 fighter mask, a rigid metal design, conducted cold straight into a pilot's skin. RAF trials of American gear ended with 60% of crews rejecting the masks outright due to frostbite and hypoxia. Military engineers tried heating elements, redesigned valves, exotic materials, all failed. By late 1942, the crisis reached the top. General Hap Arnold received weekly reports of oxygen-related casualties so severe they were classified. Colonel Malcolm Grove's secret medical report documented 847 oxygen failures in 6 months, American crews suffocating in American planes. Harvard physiologists, MIT engineers, and Navy aviation doctors all tried and failed. Dr. Lewis Bauer testified before Congress in 1943. "We are asking men to operate in an environment more hostile than Mars. Without a breakthrough, high-altitude bombing cannot be sustained. The entire Allied strategy in Europe hung in the balance. If oxygen failures grounded the bombers, the war could drag on for years." Churchill's secret memo to Roosevelt on March 15, 1943, put it starkly. "The oxygen crisis threatens to ground our most potent weapon. We are, quite literally, suffocating our own victory." 47 mask designs had been tested and failed. The consensus: the problem was unsolvable with current science, but Arthur Hovan's Bulbulian had never been told it was impossible. He was everything the military establishment wasn't looking for, and exactly what it needed. He was 43, a civilian who had never worn a uniform. His doctorate was in dentistry, not aviation medicine. His craft was maxillofacial prosthetics, restoring faces disfigured by injury or illness. Born in Kesab, Turkey in 1900, Arthur Bulbulian escaped the Armenian genocide as a boy, arriving in America with nothing but determination and a fascination for precision. He worked his way through Embry College, then Harvard Dental School, and eventually joined the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. Bulbulian had been wrestling with the oxygen problem since 1941, when his nephew enlisted as a B-24 navigator. Every night Arthur was in that basement till 2 a.m., his wife Mary later said. Drawings everywhere, bits of rubber and metal. He was possessed. The breakthrough came from an unexpected direction, his work with patients who had lost their noses. These patients needed breathing devices that functioned reliably in extreme environments, balancing warm, moist breath against cold, dry air. The same physics applied to high-altitude flight. While military engineers obsessed over valves and circuits, Bulbulian approached it like a prosthetist. The issue wasn't oxygen delivery, it was moisture control. Exhaled breath carries water vapor that freezes instantly in sub-zero conditions, clogging lines and valves. The answer, he realized, was not to melt the ice, but to prevent it from forming at all. In March 1943, he contacted his colleague, Dr. Walter Boothby at Mayo. "I think I know how to fix the oxygen mask problem," he said. "But I need to speak to someone in Washington." Boothby doubted him. The military had poured millions into the crisis. What could a dentist offer? Yet Bulbulian's expertise in facial anatomy and airflow gave him an advantage no engineer had. His prosthetic patients couldn't tolerate malfunction. Their survival depended on flawless design. Arthur looked at problems differently, Boothby later recalled. Everyone else thought in terms of hardware. He thought in terms of the human face as a living system. On April 2, 1943, Bulbulian received orders to report to Wright Field in Dayton, Ohio, the U.S. Army Air Force's Materials Command. Packing his prototypes, he boarded a train east, unaware he was about to transform aviation medicine. Wright Field, April 7, 1943. A conference room full of engineers and officers. Colonel Donald Flickinger, head of the Aeromedical Lab, addressed them. "Gentlemen, this is Dr. Bulbulian from Mayo Clinic. He believes he's solved our oxygen problem." The engineers exchanged skeptical glances. They'd heard it before. Dozens of inventors, from MIT professors to backyard tinkerers, had promised breakthroughs. None survived altitude testing. Bulbulian opened his leather satchel and withdrew what looked like a child's Halloween mask. Unlike the rigid metal contraptions then in use, his was soft, flexible, molded from a new synthetic compound he had created in his basement. "The problem isn't the oxygen," he began in his measured Armenian accent. "The problem is moisture. Each breath sends water vapor into a frozen world. Ice is inevitable." Major Robert Stevens, the lab's chief engineer, interrupted. "Doctor, we've already tried heaters, absorbers, redesigned valves. You're fixing the wrong thing," Bulbulian said quietly. "You're trying to stop ice from forming." "I'm removing the reason it forms." He held up the mask. Unlike conventional models that covered only the nose and mouth, his design extended across the cheekbones, forming sealed side chambers. Exhaled air exited through separate pathways, never touching the incoming oxygen stream. "I call it the baffled exhalation system," he said. "Warm, moist air never meets cold oxygen. No mixing, no condensation, no ice." The room erupted with disbelief. "Impossible," barked Stevens. "You can't separate inhalation and exhalation in one mask." Captain William Teeple, a test pilot who'd nearly died from oxygen failure, scoffed. "Doc, I've flown those missions. That rubber toy won't last 5 minutes at -40. Bulbulian reached for a second prototype, black, with silver fittings. "This compound stays flexible to -60, he said. "Synthetic rubber with added plasticizers. Tested in Mayo's freezers." Laughter rippled through the room. Colonel Flickinger, embarrassed, started to close the meeting. "Dr. Bulbulian, thank you for your time, but..." Test it, Arthur interrupted. One run in your altitude chamber. If it fails, I'll go home and never trouble you again. Silence. No inventor had ever staked his claim so boldly. That's against protocol, Stevens protested. An untested mask could kill the subject. I'll wear it myself, Bulbulian replied. 30,000 feet full duration. If your chamber can mimic combat, my mask can survive it. Flickinger studied the calm, determined Armenian before him. Either this man was reckless or history was about to change. Right field altitude chamber. April 14th, 1943. 0800 hours. The chamber stood like a steel diving bell, 8 feet across, bristling with gauges and glass viewports. Dr. Arthur Bulbulian stepped inside. Arthur Bulbulian sits inside the sealed altitude chamber, his prototype oxygen mask strapped firmly to his face as technicians secure the heavy steel door. Outside, Air Force officials argue furiously over whether to abort the experiment. This is insanity, says Dr. Lewis Bauer. We're about to let a civilian dentist risk his life with untested equipment. If he dies, Congress will crucify us. Colonel Donald Flickinger checks his watch. The test should already be simulating the thin air of extreme altitude. At 25,000 feet, most men show symptoms of hypoxia within minutes if their oxygen fails. The intercom crackles to life. Control, this is Bulbulian. Mask functioning perfectly. No ice formation. Request ascent to 30,000 feet. The room erupts in protest. Major Robert Stevens slams his fist on the table. Absolutely not. Max altitude is 25,000. It's against regulations. I'm authorizing it, interrupts a commanding voice. Brigadier General Malcolm Grow, Chief Flight Surgeon of the 8th Air Force, has arrived unannounced. Continue the ascent. Sir, with respect, Stevens objects. The subject has no military training, no chamber experience. The subject, says Grow coolly, may have just solved the problem that's killing my pilots. Continue. At 30,000 feet, the ceiling for most Allied bombers, Bulbulian's voice remains calm and clear. Oxygen flow excellent. No condensation. I could stay up here all day. Every previous mask had failed long before this altitude, choked with ice crystals that suffocated the wearer. Take it to 35,000, Grow orders. Sir, that's above operational limits, warns Captain Teeple. My B-17s sometimes reach that altitude under fire, Grow replies. I need to know this mask will hold. At 35,000 feet, 7 miles above Earth, Bulbulian's voice still comes through steady. Request permission to demonstrate eating and drinking procedures. The engineers exchange puzzled looks. Eating at altitude. Through the viewing port, they watch as he lifts part of the mask, takes a sip of water and reseals it, never interrupting oxygen flow. The existing military masks had to be completely removed to eat or drink, exposing airmen to instant hypoxia. How is that even possible? Whispers Stevens. Articulated jaw section, Bulbulian explains through the intercom. The mask flexes with facial movement. Pilots can talk, eat, or take medication without removing it. The realization hits the observers like a shockwave. Current masks made radio communication nearly impossible. Pilots had to choose between speaking and breathing. Bulbulian's design removed that deadly choice. After 2 hours at extreme altitude, longer than any real combat mission, Bulbulian steps from the chamber, face flushed but unharmed. His mask shows no ice, no stiffness, no structural failure. The room stands silent until Grow finally speaks. Dr. Bulbulian, how soon can you produce 1,000 of these? Sir, Arthur replies modestly, I'm just a dentist. I don't have manufacturing capacity. Major Stevens, now converted from skeptic to believer, steps forward. The Ohio Chemical and Manufacturing Company can handle production. With Dr. Bulbulian's specifications, we could begin within weeks. There's a problem, interjects Dr. Bauer. This design violates 12 Air Force specifications. Materials, structure, safety protocols, everything is non-standard. The room falls still. Military bureaucracy could take months to approve a single part. But war doesn't wait for forms. Captain Teeple, The test pilot, who had doubted the design, breaks the silence. "Sir, I'll volunteer to be the first to use it in combat." The revolution in aviation medicine had begun, but the true test was still ahead, high over Nazi Germany, where men fought not only the enemy, but the very air they breathed. October 14th, 1943, the same date as before. But this time, something is different. Lieutenant Colonel William Temple adjusts his new A-14 oxygen mask as his B-17 Memphis Belle II climbs through 25,000 feet. The mask feels foreign, softer, more pliable than the rigid metal model he's worn for months. "How's that new mask, Skipper?" asks Sergeant Frank Morrison over the intercom. This is the A-14's first combat test. 3 weeks after Bulbulian's chamber success, 50 prototype masks have been rushed to the 95th Bomb Group in England. Colonel Curtis LeMay personally selected the crews for the trial. The mission, the ball-bearing plants at Schweinfurt, the most heavily defended target in Germany. If the masks fail, men will die, but the A-14 works flawlessly. Its baffled exhalation channels warm breath away from the cold intake. No mixing, no condensation, no ice. "Navigator to pilot," calls Lieutenant James Patterson. "Charts are perfectly clear, no fogging." For the first time, a high-altitude navigator can breathe easily and see clearly. The old masks always fogged, forcing airmen to choose between oxygen and visibility. Patterson doesn't have to choose anymore. In the ball turret below, Sergeant Morrison fights his own battle. The Sperry turret is the coldest, tightest space in the aircraft, a coffin of plexiglass and steel. Previous masks made operation nearly impossible. But the A-14's flexible design changes everything. The flexible construction of the A-14 allows full head movement without breaking the oxygen seal. "Bandits, 12 o'clock high," Morrison shouts. A Focke-Wulf 190's closing fast. The German fighters dive toward the formation. This is the moment when oxygen systems usually failed, when fear and adrenaline drove men to hyperventilate, flooding primitive regulators with moisture. But Morrison's breathing stays steady. The A-14's automatic demand regulator adjusts instantly to his needs. No switches to manage, no valves to jam, no panic. The attack is savage. Cannon shells tear through the bomber's aluminum skin. The ball turret takes a direct hit. Plexiglass shatters, and Morrison is suddenly exposed to the 40 gust of blast at 25,000 feet. Under the old system, he'd be dead within minutes, lungs frozen, oxygen gone. Yet the A-14 holds. Oxygen flows flawlessly. "Turrets hit bad, but I'm breathing fine," he yells. "This mask is saving my life." From the German side, Luftwaffe ace Hauptmann Klaus Mertens later recalled, "The Americans seemed different that day, sharper, quicker. The gunners tracked us with precision we hadn't seen before. Something had changed. The data soon confirmed it. Squadrons equipped with A-14 masks showed staggering improvements. Navigation errors dropped by 43%. Bombing accuracy rose by 37%. Most crucially, oxygen-related fatalities virtually disappeared. Dr. Malcolm Grove's classified report to General Arnold, dated November 30th, 1943, documented the breakthrough. The A-14 oxygen mask represents the most important advance in aviation medicine since man first took to the air. Oxygen. Casualties plummeted from 12% per mission to less than 1/3 of 1%. Production raced ahead. Ohio Chemical and Manufacturing operated around the clock, turning out 15,000 masks by December 1943. By war's end, over 85,000 had been produced, enough to equip every Allied crew flying at high altitude. Technical Sergeant Robert Hayes of the 100th Bomb Group wrote in his diary, "Before the A-14, every climb was a gamble. You knew your mask would freeze sooner or later, and when it did, you had to pick, breathe or fight. Now I can finally do both. The numbers tell the story. In the 6 months before the A-14, the 8th Air Force lost an average of 127 men each month to oxygen failures. After adoption, that number dropped below 8. But statistics can't capture what it meant in the sky. Crews reported better coordination, fewer mistakes, and higher morale. Reliable oxygen didn't just keep bodies alive, it kept minds clear. Lieutenant James Patterson, the navigator who first tested the mask over Schweinfurt, completed all 25 of his missions without a single oxygen failure. His post-war reflections summed it up. That mask didn't just keep me breathing, it kept me thinking. And thinking clearly is what brings you home. Conservative estimates credit the A-14 with saving over 3,000 Allied airmen directly. The true impact, including the missions that succeeded because crews stayed conscious, is likely twice that. May 8, 1945. VE Day. Church bells ring across America as victory is declared in Europe. In Rochester, Minnesota, Dr. Arthur Bulbulian sits quietly in his basement workshop. On the bench lies a letter from the War Department, thanking him for his distinguished contribution to the Allied war effort. He never talked about the war, recalls his daughter, Mary Bulbulian Thompson. We knew he'd done something important, but he would only say he helped make masks for pilots. He was the most modest man I've ever known. Others filled in the story. Captain James Patterson wrote to him in 1946, "Dr. Bulbulian, you may not remember me, but I flew with your oxygen mask over Germany. Because of your invention, 25 missions became possible instead of impossible. Because of you, we came home." Letters like his arrived by the dozens, from gunners, navigators, bombardiers, men who owed their lives to an Armenian dentist who refused to believe a problem was impossible. Declassified. Records now reveal the full scale of his achievement: 127,000 A-14 masks, built before the war's end. They equipped not only American but also British, Canadian, Australian, and Free French air crews, and the innovations endured. The baffled exhalation system, flexible synthetic rubber, and articulated jaw section became standard in all post-war aviation. Today's fighter pilots, soaring twice as high as World War II bombers, still rely on the same principles Arthur Bulbulian forged in his basement, an unassuming man whose obsession with breath helped thousands keep theirs. In his quiet basement workshop, the same place where his wartime breakthrough began, Arthur Bulbulian continued to tinker and teach. In 1970, at the age of 70, he received an honorary degree from Umberry College. The citation read, "To Arthur Bulbulian, whose inventive spirit and devotion to human welfare embody the highest traditions of American ingenuity." The audience rose to its feet in a long ovation. Arthur blushed, almost uncomfortable with the praise. Colonel Curtis LeMay, who had overseen the A-14 mask's combat trials, later reflected in his memoirs, "Of all the technological advances that won the air war, none was more vital than Bulbulian's oxygen mask. It turned high-altitude flight from an act of endurance into a manageable routine." Yet the tribute that most captured his legacy came from Dr. Walter Boothby, Bulbulian's colleague at the Mayo Clinic and co-inventor of the original BLB mask. Writing in 1975, Boothby said, "Arthur solved in his basement what entire teams of engineers couldn't solve in laboratories. He proved that even the most complex problems yield to simple, elegant solutions if you approach them with empathy and clear understanding of human needs." Dr. Arthur Bulbulian passed away in 1996 at the age of 96. His obituary in the Rochester Post-Bulletin mentioned his Mayo Clinic work, his achievements in facial prosthetics, and his contributions to dental science. It devoted a single line to his wartime service. During World War II, he contributed to aviation medicine research. There was no mention of the thousands of lives saved. No reference to the invention that changed the face of aerial warfare. Just like the man himself, it was modest, restrained, and focused on others rather than himself. But what it should have said is this: he created the device that proved how one person's dedication to preserving life can alter the course of history. In the end, greatness isn't measured by awards or fame, but by the number of lives made better through one's work. By that measure, Arthur Bulbulian was a giant among men,